What is female materialism? The answer isn't complicated, in fact, it's pretty clear. Some women are willing to do whatever it takes to secure what they want. In my case, my wife married me for my money. When I first met my future wife, I was doing exceptionally well for myself. Fresh out of college with a degree from a top engineering program, I had graduated at the top of my class. I landed a lucrative job with a major energy company, and life seemed to be falling into place. Women flocked to me, drawn by my confidence, ambition, and, let's be honest, my income. Nights out often ended with me waking up next to someone new. Some of these women wanted something serious, but I wasn't interested in a committed relationship. Marriage was the furthest thing from my mind. Then I met Laura. She was the kind of woman who turned heads the moment she walked into a room. There was something magnetic about her, especially when she strutted down the street in heels. Men couldn't help but stop and stare. Our meeting was purely by chance. I was representing my company at an industry event, and Laura was there as a contestant in a competition. It didn't take long to notice that she stood out from the crowd. Unsurprisingly, she won the title, Queen of the Podium. Her beauty was breathtaking, and I knew I had to meet her. It didn't take much effort to get her number, and the very next day, I showed up at her house with an elaborate bouquet of roses. Laura greeted me politely, but I noticed her glancing at the flowers with a look that was hard to read, almost like she wasn't impressed. Her father, though, seemed to like me well enough. He welcomed me into their home, and from there, I started spending more and more time with Laura. Before I knew it, she consumed my thoughts. I couldn't focus at work, and the carefree bachelor lifestyle I had loved so much was gone. I was completely infatuated. In what felt like no time at all, I proposed to her. She said yes, and I thought I'd found everything I could ever want in life. But the reality of marriage with Laura was different from what I'd envisioned. The 12 years we spent together weren't exactly smooth sailing. Laura had expensive tastes and didn't hesitate to indulge them. She refused to work and dismissed the idea of having children, claiming she wasn't willing to go through the physical pain of childbirth. We argued frequently, but I always forgave her. My love for her blinded me to everything else. Then, about a year ago, one of my colleagues, Ryan, invited me to his extravagant birthday celebration. The party was held at a luxurious country estate that looked like something out of a movie. It featured a 5-star restaurant, a sauna, perfectly manicured gardens, and even a helipad. The walls were lined with photos of celebrities who had frequented the venue. The guest list included some of the most influential people in the industry. Among them was Frank Daniels, a board member of my company. Frank was an infamous figure, known for navigating the chaotic business world of the 90s and emerging unscathed. He arrived with his wife, a small army of bodyguards, and a convoy of sleek black cars. Standing next to men like Frank, I felt insignificant. But it wasn't the first time I'd been in the same room as these high-powered individuals. 3 years earlier, I'd attended another over-the-top event to celebrate the birth of Ryan's first son. That evening, I'd lost track of Laura for a good portion of the night. When she finally reappeared, I asked her where she'd been. She casually said she'd had a headache, taken some aspirin, and gone for a walk to clear her mind. At the time, I didn't think twice about it. At this latest party, the same thing happened. Laura disappeared for most of the evening, leaving me to mingle awkwardly with the other guests. When I asked her about it later, she shrugged and said the place gave her bad vibes. She even hinted that she might skip similar events in the future. Her words didn't alarm me, I took her at face value. But about a week later, my phone rang. The caller ID showed it was my father-in-law, Jim. Jim was a retired law enforcement officer who'd served in various agencies throughout his career. He was old school, stern, with no shortage of opinions about how a real man should live his life. Jim had never hidden his disdain for me. To him, I wasn't good enough for his daughter, and I'd never measure up to his idea of a perfect son-in-law. "Hello, loser," he said, his tone as sharp as ever. I ignored the jab, not wanting to stoop to his level. "Hi, Jim," I replied evenly. He cut straight to the point. "Listen, I've got something to tell you, and you're not gonna like it. Congratulations, you're a fool. I always knew Laura married you for your money, and now I've got proof. She's been seeing a real man behind your back." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. "She's been sneaking around with a guy named Alex," Jim continued. "He's ex-military, special forces, and works as the head of security for Frank Daniels. Remember that party? She spent most of the night in Alex's car. If you've got even an ounce of pride left, you'll divorce her and let her go. She deserves a man who can give her what you can't, like a real family, kids, the whole deal. You're just in the way." Before I could say a word, Jim hung up. After Jim's call, I sat in my chair, completely stunned. The words he said replayed in my mind like an echo, each repetition more piercing than the last. I felt like the ground beneath me had shifted, and I was free-falling into an abyss of doubt and betrayal. Could it really be true? Was Laura, my wife of over a decade, seeing someone else? I tried to convince myself that Jim was being his usual abrasive self, always eager to knock me down a peg. He'd never liked me and made no effort to hide it, so it wasn't out of the question that he would fabricate something cruel. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was truth in his voice. The way he spoke, his certainty, it left no room for comfort or doubt. For the next few days, I found myself walking through life in a daze, my mind endlessly replaying every suspicious moment I'd overlooked. The parties where she disappeared, the unexplained late nights, the growing distance between us. It was as if my brain was piecing together a puzzle I hadn't even realized existed. The picture it formed was devastating. Desperate for clarity, I reached out to someone I trusted, an old friend who had connections. He introduced me to Jake, a private investigator with a background in security. Jake had a reputation for being discreet and thorough, and if anyone could uncover the truth, it was him. Meeting Jake felt surreal. Sitting across from him in a quiet diner, I explained my situation, my voice betraying the turmoil inside me. He listened without judgment, nodding occasionally as I recounted the events that had led me to suspect my wife. He assured me that he would handle everything with the utmost care and discretion. All I had to do was wait. The waiting was agony. Each day stretched endlessly, filled with uncertainty and dread. Laura's behavior didn't change, if anything, she seemed perfectly normal, which only made the situation worse. The casual way she moved through our life, smiling and chatting as if nothing was wrong, left me questioning everything. Was she really capable of such betrayal, or was I letting Jim's venomous words poison my mind? One evening, she came home later than usual, claiming she'd been out with her friends. She greeted me with a kiss on the cheek and a smile, but I noticed something that made my stomach turn, a faint trace of cologne, one I didn't recognize. It wasn't overpowering, just subtle enough to raise a red flag. I told myself it could have been anything, a friendly hug, a brush against someone in a crowded bar, but the doubt had already taken root. A week later, Jake called with the results of his investigation. He asked to meet, and I agreed, my heart racing with anticipation and dread. When I arrived, he was waiting for me, a folder sitting on the table in front of him. The moment I opened the folder, my world shattered. Inside were photographs, grainy but clear enough to tell the story. Laura, sitting in a car, her lips locked with another man's. There was no mistaking the intimacy in the images. Jake explained the details he had uncovered. The man in the photos was Alex, a former military officer and now the head of security for Frank Daniels, one of the powerful figures in our business circle. Laura and Alex had been meeting for months, primarily at events but also at his apartment. As I stared at the pictures, the full weight of the betrayal settled on me. All the doubts, all the questions I'd tried to suppress, had been answered in the most brutal way. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built my life around, was unfaithful. That night, I went home in a fog. Laura was already in bed, her breathing soft and steady as she slept. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her, trying to make sense of how we had gotten here. A part of me wanted to wake her up, to demand answers, but another part of me felt paralyzed by the enormity of what I now knew. The warmth and love I had once felt for her were buried under a heavy blanket of anger, sadness, and betrayal. I realized that our life together, the life I thought was solid, was built on a fragile foundation. And now, it was crumbling. The days after seeing those photos felt like a blur. My thoughts were a chaotic mess, swinging between anger, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of loss. I went through the motions of life on autopilot, doing my best to keep my emotions hidden from Laura. Every smile she gave me, every casual moment we shared, felt like a knife twisting deeper into my gut. I couldn't decide what was worse, the betrayal itself or the effort it took to pretend I didn't know. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our life together. I thought about the day I met her, the early days of our marriage when everything seemed perfect, and how I'd convinced myself we were happy. The realization that those memories were now tainted by her actions was unbearable. I felt like a fool, blind to the reality that had been unfolding right in front of me. The betrayal wasn't just about her infidelity, it was about the life I thought we were building together. The plans we made, the sacrifices I'd made for her, all felt meaningless now. And yet, even with the evidence in my hands, part of me wanted to deny it. I wanted to believe there was some explanation, some reason that would make it all make sense. But deep down, I knew better. I decided to keep my discovery to myself, at least for the time being. I needed time to process everything, to figure out what I wanted to do next. Confronting Laura without a clear plan felt reckless, and I wasn't ready to face the fallout just yet. In the meantime, I started taking small steps to protect myself. I spoke with a lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Amanda who came highly recommended. She was calm and professional, asking pointed questions about my marriage, our finances, and the evidence I had gathered. "You've got a strong case," she said, flipping through the photos Jake had provided. "But you need to be careful. If she senses you're onto her, things could get messy fast." Her words stuck with me. Laura wasn't just my wife, she was someone who knew me better than anyone else. If I wasn't careful, she'd see through me in an instant. At home, I became hyper-aware of her behavior. Every phone call, every text message, every moment she wasn't with me felt like another piece of the puzzle falling into place. She was careful, but there were cracks in her facade. She started spending more time away from home, always with an excuse that sounded plausible on the surface. A spa day with the girls, she'd say, or a meeting with a friend from college. Her stories were polished, her tone casual, but now that I knew what to look for, I could see the signs. The subtle hesitations in her voice, the way she avoided eye contact when she spoke, it was all there. One evening, I decided to test the waters. Laura had mentioned a dinner with friends, but something about her story didn't add up. After she left, I called Jake and asked him to follow her. He agreed, and a few hours later, I got a text, confirmed. Same guy as before. Reading those words felt like a punch to the stomach. It wasn't just a one-time mistake or a fleeting lapse in judgment. This was deliberate. Ongoing. That night, I sat in the living room, waiting for her to come home. When she walked through the door, she was all smiles, acting as if nothing was out of the ordinary. I forced myself to act normal, but every fiber of my being wanted to scream at her, to demand answers. Instead, I played my role. I asked about her evening, listened to her rehearsed story, and pretended everything was fine. But inside, I was seething. The next few days were some of the hardest I'd ever endured. I kept replaying the text Jake had sent me, the images in the folder, and Jim's voice on the phone, mocking me for being blind to it all. I wanted to confront Laura, to throw everything in her face and demand she tell me why she'd done this. But I also knew that once I crossed that line, there'd be no going back. I began to distance myself emotionally, even if outwardly everything seemed the same. I stopped initiating conversations with her unless absolutely necessary. When she asked me about my day, I gave short, non-committal answers. I could see her noticing the change, but she didn't press me on it. Maybe she thought I was stressed from work, or maybe she didn't care enough to ask. Either way, the silence between us grew. At work, I buried myself in projects, trying to distract myself from the storm brewing at home. My colleagues noticed I was quieter than usual, but no one asked why. If they had, I wouldn't have known how to answer. One afternoon, I received a call from Amanda. She had been looking into our financial situation, and her findings were unsettling. Laura had been spending far more than I realized. Designer clothes, expensive jewelry, trips I didn't know about, it was all there, laid out in black and white. She's been preparing for something, Amanda said. Whether it's an escape plan or something else, you need to be ready. Her words sent a chill down my spine. Laura wasn't just betraying me emotionally, she was systematically dismantling the life we'd built together. I hung up the phone, my resolve hardening. Whatever love I still felt for her was buried beneath the weight of her actions. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was about survival, mine, not hers. I knew the time was coming when I'd have to confront her. But I wasn't ready yet. Not until I had every piece of evidence, every loose end tied up. I needed to be prepared for whatever came next, no matter how painful it might be. The days after I discovered Laura's ongoing meetings with Alex were some of the longest and most agonizing of my life. The weight of the truth hung heavy on me, and no matter how much I tried to distract myself, the knowledge was always there, simmering just beneath the surface. Each moment we spent together under the same roof felt like a cruel joke, as if I were participating in a charade that only one of us knew was a lie. Laura's behavior remained the same, as if nothing had changed. She came and went with the same practiced ease, her excuses polished and effortless. But now that I knew the truth, everything she said felt laced with venom, every smile she offered tinged with betrayal. Jake continued his investigation, his updates cutting through any illusions I might have clung to. His latest findings revealed more than I was prepared to handle. Laura and Alex were discussing plans to leave town together. The thought of her not only betraying me but actively planning a future with another man shook me to my core. I knew I couldn't remain silent any longer. I had spent weeks hiding the truth, trying to figure out the best way to confront her, but now the decision was made for me. Her plans to leave made it clear, I had to act before she did. That evening, I waited for Laura to return home. My heart pounded as I rehearsed what I needed to say, my mind racing with every possible outcome. The air in the house felt suffocating as I prepared to bring the charade to an end. When she walked through the door, she greeted me with the same practiced smile, the one that used to bring me comfort but now only served as a reminder of how much had changed. Her casual demeanor, the way she placed her bag on the counter and kicked off her shoes, felt almost mocking. I sat her down in the living room, placing the folder with Jake's findings on the table between us. For a moment, she seemed confused, her expression faltering as she glanced at the folder. But as I explained what I knew, her demeanor shifted. The realization that she had been caught didn't elicit guilt or remorse. Instead, she seemed cold and detached, as though she had been expecting this moment all along. The indifference in her eyes was like a slap to the face, and it became clear that whatever love we had once shared was long gone. She didn't deny the affair or try to explain herself. Instead, she shifted the blame, painting a picture of a marriage that had failed her. She claimed she had been unhappy for years, that I had been too focused on my work to notice her slipping away. Her words were sharp and deliberate, each one a calculated attempt to deflect responsibility for her actions. As she spoke, I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. Her justification for betraying me felt hollow, a desperate attempt to rewrite our history and absolve herself of guilt. She spoke about Alex with a casual familiarity that made my stomach turn, as if he were the solution to all her problems and I had simply been a stepping stone in her life. It became clear that she had no intention of apologizing or making amends. To her, this was the end of the line, and she was ready to move on without a second thought. The years we had spent together, the life we had built, meant nothing to her anymore. When she finally stood up and walked away, I was left sitting in the empty living room, staring at the folder on the table. The house, once a place of warmth and comfort, now felt cold and unfamiliar. The silence was deafening, and for the first time, I truly felt the weight of what had been lost. Laura's betrayal wasn't just an act of infidelity, it was the complete dismantling of our life together. She had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. The days following Laura's admission were some of the hardest of my life. Even with the truth laid bare, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of loss and confusion. I had loved her deeply, poured myself into our marriage, and now it was all gone. Yet, the pain wasn't just about the betrayal, it was about the way she had orchestrated every detail of her infidelity, as if our life together had been nothing more than a convenient arrangement for her. As I dug deeper into the aftermath, more pieces of her betrayal came into focus. It wasn't just the affair with Alex or the lies about her whereabouts, it was the financial deceit that gutted me. Amanda, my lawyer, uncovered a series of transactions that showed Laura had been quietly draining our joint accounts for months. Designer clothes, luxurious spa retreats, expensive gifts, all of it pointed to a life of indulgence she had been living behind my back. What stung the most was discovering she had used some of that money to fund her time with Alex. Weekend getaways disguised as business trips, lavish dinners, and even the down payment on a condo in his name, it was all there, documented in cold, hard numbers. Each revelation felt like a knife twisting deeper, confirming that this wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was premeditated, calculated, and ruthless. Jake's final report painted a picture I couldn't ignore. Laura had been planning her escape for months, if not longer. She and Alex had discussed moving to another city, starting fresh with the money she had taken from me. The condo was to be their new home, a place where they could live openly, free from the constraints of secrecy. The most damning piece of evidence came in the form of an audio recording Jake had managed to obtain. In it, Laura spoke candidly to Alex about her plans, her tone dripping with disdain and entitlement. She mocked me, referring to me as a safety net she had outgrown. She laughed about how easy it had been to manipulate me, how I'd never suspected a thing until it was too late. Hearing her words shattered whatever remnants of love I still had for her. The woman I had once adored was gone, replaced by someone cold and selfish, someone I barely recognized. She had not only betrayed our marriage but had done so with a callousness that left no room for doubt about where I stood in her life. When the divorce proceedings began, Laura tried to play the victim. She painted me as neglectful and distant, twisting the truth to suit her narrative. But the evidence Amanda and Jake had gathered was irrefutable. The photos, financial records, and audio recordings left no doubt about her infidelity and her blatant disregard for our marriage. Despite her efforts, the court ruled in my favor. The judge awarded me the majority of our shared assets, including the house, and ordered Laura to return a significant portion of the money she had siphoned off. Watching her face as the verdict was read was a bittersweet moment. She had tried to destroy me, but in the end, it was her lies that unraveled everything. In the months that followed, I began the slow process of rebuilding my life. The house felt empty at first, a constant reminder of what had been lost. But as time passed, I started to reclaim it, turning it into a space that felt like my own again. I focused on my work, my friends, and most importantly, myself. Therapy helped me confront the pain and anger I had been carrying, allowing me to let go of the bitterness that had threatened to consume me. As for Laura, I heard through mutual acquaintances that her relationship with Alex didn't last. The fantasy they had built together quickly fell apart under the weight of reality. Alex's reckless spending and gambling habits drained whatever money she had left, leaving her with nothing. In a way, her downfall was poetic justice, but I didn't dwell on it. My focus was on moving forward, on building a life that was honest and fulfilling. The betrayal had left scars, but it had also taught me valuable lessons about trust, resilience, and self-worth. Looking back, I realized that Laura's betrayal, as painful as it was, didn't define me. It was a chapter in my life, one filled with heartbreak and lessons I wouldn't wish on anyone. But it was also the catalyst for growth, pushing me to rediscover who I was and what I truly wanted. And in the end, that made all the difference.